Welcome to the clinic, everyone. Today, we're going to scrub in and dive right into this explainer to conduct a kind of medical grand rounds on the biological impacts of smoking versus vaping. As medical professionals, or really just as curious people who care about how our bodies work, we absolutely need to look under the microscope and examine exactly what happens at a cellular level when we inhale these substances. Here's a quick look at the patient chart for today's examination. We'll be covering the clinical history, the anatomy of a vape, the biological impacts of smoking, the biological impacts of vaping, and finally, we'll deliver our final diagnosis. All right, let's start with Section 1, the clinical history. You know, humanity's relationship with the tobacco plant has been a completely wild ride. Going back over 12,000 years, indigenous peoples of the Americas used tobacco for spiritual and medicinal rituals. Then, fast forward to 1571, and European doctors were literally writing in medical journals that tobacco could cure 36 different illnesses. Obviously, our clinical standards have improved just a bit since then. Jumping to 2003, a pharmacist named Han Lick invented the modern e-cigarette, hoping to help people quit smoking. But, as we'll see, that eventually paved the way for a terrifying and totally unexplained lung injury outbreak in 2019.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of a Vape. So, before we can diagnose why a vape might actually be more dangerous in some ways, we really need to understand what it is. Unlike traditional combustible cigarettes, vapes don't use fire. Instead, a tiny battery powers a microprocessor, which fires up a heating element inside an atomizer. Then, a wicking material draws in the e-liquid, the vape juice, and that heating element instantly vaporizes the liquid into an inhalable steam. Now, on the surface, breathing in steam sounds way cleaner than inhaling smoke, right? Well, as clinicians, we know better than to just look at the surface. Let's look at Section 3, Biological Impacts of Smoking. First up, we've got to talk about the main neurotoxin here, nicotine. The leaf of the tobacco plant is packed with about 20,000 parts per million of nicotine. In nature, it actually acts as a natural insecticide to stop animals from eating the plant. When we humans consume enough of this highly addictive poison, it triggers a lethal cocktail of symptoms. We're talking nausea and uncontrollable hiccuping on the mild end. But ramp up that dose and you're looking at severe anxiety, heart palpitations, diarrhea, and yes, in high enough amounts, even death. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that nicotine all by itself triggers vasoconstriction. Big word, right? Basically, it means it physically shrinks your blood vessels. Think of it like stepping on a garden hose. When your veins shrink, your body is literally starved of efficient oxygen flow. And this microscopic starvation is exactly what sets the stage for massive chronic health conditions, drastically spiking a patient's risk for stroke, heart disease, vision loss, and diabetes.
But wait, the pathology gets so much worse when you add fire. A pre-lit cigarette already contains around 600 chemicals. We're talking ammonia, which is used in explosives, acetone, a paint remover, butane, literally barbecue fuel, and formaldehyde, which is used to embalm dead bodies. But the real trauma happens during combustion. That explosive chemical reaction remixes those 600 chemicals into over 7,000 brand new compounds. It creates free-base nicotine that hits your brain instantly and yields at least 69 proven cancer-causing carcinogens.
And one of the most gruesome clinical side effects of this chemical firestorm? Tar. When these thousands of compounds bind with burnt particulates from the smoke, they form this thick, sticky, black substance that permanently coats and clogs the inside of your lungs. It's a straight path to severe, long-term breathing problems.
And sadly, this trauma isn't just isolated to the smoker. Secondhand smoke actually increases a completely innocent bystander's risk of stroke by a massive 20 to 30% and heart disease by 25 to 30%. Researchers have even documented third-hand smoke, meaning you can be exposed to lingering carcinogens just by touching the sofa or the walls in a room where someone recently smoked. Okay, let's pivot to Section 4, Biological Impacts of Vaping. Let's analyze that e-liquid. The base liquids are usually propylene glycol or vegetable glycerine, which honestly are just common food solvents and thickeners. The massive danger arises when you mix those bases with nicotine and highly unregulated artificial flavorings and then superheat them. Heating up perfectly innocent food-grade elements can cause them to undergo a violent chemical reaction, recombining into entirely new, totally toxic carcinogenic substances. It's basically an unregulated chemistry experiment happening right in your lungs. And this Wild West lack of regulation led directly to a terrifying medical mystery back in 2019. Seemingly out of nowhere, over 1,600 vapers were suddenly hospitalized with severe, unexplained lung injuries. Tragically, it resulted in 34 fatalities. Doctors officially named this sudden disease E-Valley, which stands for e-cigarette or vaping-associated lung injury.
So, what caused it? The primary culprit behind this deadly outbreak turned out to be an additive called vitamin E acetate, predominantly found in black market THC cartridges. Now, vitamin E acetate is a synthetic vitamin used all the time in topical skin creams where it is completely 100% harmless. But this outbreak proved a crucial medical lesson. What is perfectly safe to rub on your skin can be wildly hazardous and even lethal when it's vaporized and absorbed directly into your delicate lung tissue.
But the danger isn't just in black market stuff. Even seemingly innocent FDA-approved food flavors like caramel, fruity drinks, or buttery microwave popcorn often contain an artificial flavoring called diacetyl. Sure, it's totally safe to eat, but inhaling diacetyl, that causes an irreversible, absolutely devastating chronic illness called bronchiolitis obliterans. In the clinic, we casually call this popcorn lung, named after the factory workers who originally got sick just from breathing in microwave popcorn fumes all day.
And just to put the sheer scale of this exposure into perspective, check this out. A 2016 study tested 51 common e-liquid flavors on the market. A staggering 39 of them contain diacetyl. That means the vast majority of patients out there inhaling these sweet-smelling clouds were unknowingly exposing their lungs to a chemical literally proven to cause a debilitating chronic disease. So, we have to ask ourselves, what is actually happening on a cellular level when these artificial clouds hit our respiratory system? Your lungs, they aren't just empty balloons. They are incredibly complex organs with their own built-in defense mechanisms. Overwhelmingly, medical professionals agree on one simple rule. If it's not air, it shouldn't go in your lungs. Deep inside your lungs are these microscopic, hair-like structures called cilia. They constantly wave back and forth, acting like tiny brooms to sweep out bacteria and prevent infection. But chemicals commonly found in vapes, like cinnamaldehyde, the chemical that gives you that yummy cinnamon taste, they actually paralyze these cilia. When your lung hairs are paralyzed, the sweeping stops completely. This strips you of your primary defense mechanism, leaving you highly vulnerable to nasty respiratory infections for weeks at a time. All right, we've gathered all our data. Let's move to section 5, the final diagnosis. This is the ultimate question every patient asks when they're sitting right there on the exam table. Does removing the fire, the butane, and the tar make vaping the ultimate cure to the smoking epidemic? Is it actually truly healthier? Well, the consensus from the experts is yes, but only barely. While e-liquids do typically have less nicotine and lack the heavy tar of combustible tobacco, the severe lack of regulation and the totally undiscovered chemical reactions occurring inside that heating element make vaping incredibly dangerous in its own right. Plus, limited epidemiological evidence suggests it actually helps people quit smoking anyway. I mean, even Han Leek, the pharmacist who literally invented the modern vape to cure his own smoking habit, he's been completely unable to quit. For a solid second opinion, we just look to the World Health Organization. They provide the only truly safe, medically sound prescription for this whole epidemic, stating very clearly, both tobacco products and e-cigarettes pose risks to health. The safest approach is to use neither. So, as you leave the clinic today, I want you to consider the incredibly delicate anatomy of your own lungs. We've seen exactly how combustion creates a tar-filled chemical firestorm, and how vaporization turns totally food-safe flavors into paralyzed cells and popcorn lung. You have to ask yourself, do you really want to risk making your respiratory system a testing ground for completely unregulated chemicals? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and as always, stay curious.